Welcome to another one of our Revenue Rewired from Innovation Visual, the podcast where we explore how data and strategy are transforming the way businesses drive growth. I'm Tim Butler, the CEO of Innovation Visual, and with each episode, I'll be talking to people reshaping the future of revenues, from CROs to CMOs, tech leaders to transformation experts. If you're ready to rewire your business growth, then you're in the right place to be listening here. For this episode, I'm really happy to be joined by Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Tim.
Hi. Well, and when we were chatting about this, we thought we wanted to just have a conversation that people would find useful. I'm going to use the word AI, such a buzzword at the moment, but we're seeing a lot of people in the revenue leadership space that are struggling to take AI adoption to the next level, like actually take AI into their tech stack. So we wanted to talk about that today. So you ready for a conversation on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So you see a lot of different scenarios coming across your desk from new people that we're talking to about potentially working with them to people that we've worked with for a number of years. What are you seeing in terms of actually getting AI, which is a vast area, into people's tech stacks?
Yeah, I suppose there's a bit of a broad spectrum in terms of how businesses are using AI. You've got at the one end, we have clients and prospects who kind of come to us with the brief of, oh, I've been told I need to be adopting AI, or I'm hearing a lot about AI, so I think I should be adopting AI. And they don't really know where to start, or, they're kind of their thinking is maybe not aligned that well with business objectives. So you kind of have that end where it's almost not been adopted, through to, I suppose, those where AI is in use, but maybe it's in use in pockets amongst the team. So you have kind of internal champions who've just started using it personally, and they're maybe using it more from a kind of search functionality, maybe research or like content generation. So they're kind of at the copy and paste into ChatGPT side of things, and maybe they're using that as almost like a personal assistant. But essentially, the broader use of it across the business is maybe not particularly well structured, not being managed that well. The direction isn't necessarily been set that well across the business.
Okay, let's talk about setting that direction then. If you're the CMO of an organization, can you help set that direction, or is it something that the CEO alone has to do? Nobody wants to sort of sit around and wait for others. Certainly, I'm Mr. Impatient. So, how do you actually get your organization on the journey?
Yeah, I think the conversation at the top of a business is important because there's a lot of scaremongering around AI. There's, a lot of unknowns. I think from a business leader perspective, it's like educate yourself is a good starting point, because I think there's that worry from a lot of people's point of view. When you talk about AI, it's about kind of people's jobs being replaced, or it's about data privacy. Those are often the first things that I think people are thinking of, rather than actually where's the value in this? What should we be doing with this? And we need to be thinking about AI as one of the many tools, or a collection of tools within the toolkit that a business has. Yes, there are things that need to be taken very seriously around the privacy of your customers' data, or um, you know how it's going to affect your workforce. But if you're not having those conversations, this is going to essentially be happening without you being at the wheel. And technology is moving very fast. So I
Yeah.
think by educating yourself as a business leader and making
Yeah.
sure you understand the implication of AI is going to impact your business.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're putting on some workshops in the autumn this year,
Mm.
specifically for leaders around how they can work with AI into their organization at a deeper level. But what you're saying is you've got to have a certain amount of self education there in order to be able to sort of understand the landscape of AI and where it fits. What's your take on AI policies within organizations and where they're sitting at the moment in terms of
I mean, I
making things
suppose
happen?
a lot of businesses probably haven't really developed much of a policy around certainly the use of AI. I'm sure there are plenty of companies that are worrying about how they fit into their T's and C's, and kind of trying to cover themselves legally in terms of what AI is doing. But in terms of a policy for how it should be used, where it can be used, where it can't be used, I don't think companies have got a good grasp on that at the moment.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
So it's interesting because I was at an event with very senior leadership of different businesses just a few weeks ago, and I was gobsmacked by the lack of AI policies. Because we've been talking about AI policies in like our leaders' lunches, the people who are sort of in the sphere. We've got a say a group. It's a large group because we have different people coming in different lunches, and most of those people over the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months, because we've been talking about AI and AI policies. Most of the people coming to those events and part of that private LinkedIn group actually do now have AI policies. But when I went into this wider room, and we're talking about, I spoke to more than a dozen, probably 20 odd different leaders, and honestly, I was gobsmacked by the fact that most of the answers were no, but I think we need to have one, or I think somebody's putting something together. There was only, I think, one definitive, yes, we've got one and we're confident in what it covers. If you don't have a policy, you can't manage your staff and your
Yeah,
employees properly around AI, because you can't say you shouldn't do that if there's not a policy that says you can't do it. And the other thing, which I don't think people are thinking about this, is what's their risk from not having a policy? So if you not got a policy which says do not drop this kind of data into this type of model or LLM or whatever it might be, right? What happens when your employee takes a spreadsheet of 10,000 customer records, which has private data on it, and drops it into something that then actually isn't private?
hmm,
And, you know, the fine for GDPR is based on revenue of your company.
yeah,
And so I think it's gobsmacking that people haven't gone, hold on a minute, there's a massive risk exposure from not actually having this written down and saying what you can and can't do. And I think people feel that I just think they're mystified as to what should be there. And they probably think that they need to go to a lawyer, spend lots of money on some fancy policy, when actually, in my mind, it needs some thinking about in the first place. And again, coming back to what you said about being informed, do people actually
yeah.
know what the limitations and the differences between these things are?
Agreed. And I think there'll be, you know, Gen Z and millennial workers now in the workplace whose kind of natural instinct is to be using things like ChatGPT as a search engine, you know, and have grown up in a world where data privacy of their own data is hard to come by, and therefore their attitude towards it probably is looser than the company would want it to be. So their natural inclination is going to be to use these tools and think about things like data privacy second. So those policies do need to be in place, but they
Yeah,
also need to be constructed in a way that's going to encourage the business to adopt the tools effectively.
yeah. I'm not of the opinion where it's like you must not use AI. I think that's the worst policy in the world. That's like saying don't use a computer, you're only allowed to use an
Yeah, don't
abacus.
Google things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that you need the policy in place to then go to the next level when we talk about infusing technology, AI into your tech stack. But actually, it's adopting AI in your organization is probably a more realistic conversational part. Although, in terms of our remit, we tend to look at the sort of the bit which influences revenue. Because from policy, it's then into training and adoption and education, I would say. And I
Yeah.
mean, what have you been seeing on that?
Again, it's very self led a lot of the time, isn't it? People are either using the tools or they've been given the tools. We have seen some businesses, we've seen some partner businesses that have been sharing resource out across the business in terms of, you know, here are structured prompts that will deliver certain value. There are companies doing that, but I think there are more companies not doing that. And
Yeah,
then we talked about infusing AI into the tech stack. Whether you're actively doing that or not as a business, a lot of the tools that you are already using are doing it for you now. whether it be Photoshop, whether it be your CRM. Like AI is now the buzzword for every SaaS platform in the world. And that means those tools are there for your team to use right next to your customer data, whether you like it or not. And therefore, like that education, I think is really important. So whether
Yeah,
it be a structured approach, making sure everybody in the team is going through a certain curriculum, if you like, of AI training, or whether it's holding. So we also have our AI task force. And we try and stay ahead of trends, and then we make sure we're holding those training sessions internally around that.
yeah,
And I think that's definitely a really good approach. And I
yeah.
think the scale of your business is going to dictate, how you approach that training.
Yeah, and you touch on the AI task force. I think some people call them AI councils, and I think having a group which is mandated to actually look at what's going on in terms of the relevance of different tools and different technologies to a specific business and then drive that forward. I think that's the next stage in terms of understanding what training needs to happen and what education needs to happen within the business and what then a roadmap might look like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And these tools are changing so fast. We saw that update a few months ago where suddenly ChatGPT held memory across all of your chats, which at first glance seems great. Oh, fantastic. My assistant is going to learn with me. But actually, you start getting this confirmation bias because it remembers everything you've ever asked it. So the next
Yeah,
time you come and ask it, it holds that information and it kind of starts giving you the answers you want to hear. So
yeah,
that change can be so rapid, and the way that these companies are rolling out updates and new models
yeah,
got to be actively, training and pushing forward with this. You can't do a set and forget in terms of policy and training.
yeah. What, in terms of an AI task force and an AI council, how do you think that should be made up? Typically, our audience is sort of mid-sized businesses
Mm.
and are much larger. How would you like if somebody's listening to this who's a leader and thinks, well, we don't have an AI task force, an AI leader, that sounds like a sensible thing we should do.
Yeah.
How should that be constituented, if that's the right word?
I think you need people from across your business. So we're talking kind of the breadth of business in terms of your different functions, but also the depth in terms of from seniority downwards. So I think you need a good cross section of people across your teams,
Yeah,
but you also need to be making use of those people in the team who are natural champions and natural early adopters. So there will be people who just are naturally inclined to try new tools, to read about things, to listen to podcasts, to, soak up that knowledge. They're just so valuable as people within the business. And you know what? They're going to be doing it anyway, whether you involve them in your task force or not. So you might as well
yeah,
harness that energy and have them in the discussion.
yeah. Interesting, slightly side note, but I saw a stat that um, employees that are good at using AI for their job can get paid up to 56% more than their peers doing the same job. So if you're listening to this and you want to get a pay rise, informing yourself more and more about using AI and being involved in things like task forces is obviously a
Yeah.
very valuable thing to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating, isn't it? What people haven't necessarily realized that aren't adopting AI in their daily workflows is it's not just about image creation or getting it to write a blog. It's just about like efficiency. It's getting AI to do things that are repetitive or involve a lot of data or something you just do very regularly. They
Yeah,
don't need to be highly complicated tasks that AI is doing for you, but the efficiency gains can be massive.
yeah. I think it's interesting because you're talking about some things there which are at a personal efficiency level, using some of these tools as an employee rather than a system or business level. And I think what we've seen is that where people are adopting within their own workflow, they're much more likely then to adopt the wider organizational AI
Yeah.
initiatives, I would say.
Yeah, because they get it, don't they? They see the value. I think, as with any tool, an employee or a team that feel forced into using something that they're not interested in aren't going to see the value from it. The moment it clicks and Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it might be does something for you that you didn't know it could do, and you kind of go,
Yeah.
huh, that's cool, and you get it, then I think you start to buy in and you start to go, yeah, I can understand why management is saying we need to be thinking about how we deploy AI.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some use cases for AI
Yeah.
deployment. You've already mentioned that, it's the buzzword already within lots of different SaaS things. So let's talk about embracing AI via what you're already using in your tech stack. Can you sort of tell us a bit more about how that can happen?
Yeah. So I think initially a lot of businesses were, I guess, bolting on AI. They were using existing models, whether OpenAI did very well out of this. Lots of companies started embracing that, whether it was HubSpot or Apple, they kind of just sort of adopted that technology and bolted it onto the side. What we've seen more recently is actually, these tools have now had a few years since OpenAI really kind of burst the AI bubble to think about how to deploy some of these tools a bit more thoughtfully. And
Yeah.
they're focusing a lot more on it being part of a daily workflow. How do we streamline the use of the existing platform or the existing tool by incorporating AI? Not just bolting it on, not having a kind of copy and paste relationship with it. How can we actually use this tool within here? And we're seeing that now. So for users that aren't familiar, it's going to be a lot more similar to using something like Microsoft Word, where you have things like your spell check is built in. We take that for granted now. AI
Yeah.
is starting to do that when we're talking about things like CRMs, for example, where suddenly you have this kind of ever present assistant or this functionality that's AI powered, but it's within the platform, it's within the tools, whether it's the WYSIWYG that you're writing copy in, whether it's within the tool functionality for building out an email template. AI is now there, and therefore that ease of integration within your daily workflow, I think, is a lot more obvious. So
Yeah.
in some ways, AI is becoming less in your face and more subtly part of the wider process.
Yeah.
Although obviously you always get those little stars appearing wherever a platform wants to tell you there's AI within the tool set.
Yeah.
But the actual functionality is becoming just baked in. And I think that's what's
Yeah.
quite interesting now because it really is just infused into the technology.
Yeah, whoever designed the little star icon, they should have patented it and charged 0.001p for one of those and would be rich beyond their wildest dreams now. In terms of this embedding of AI
Mm.
within platforms, are there any dangers to that?
Yeah. I mean, there are in as much as with any of these AI tools, the source of information sometimes is not always that clear. It depending on the platform you're working in, if you are dealing with customer data, I think there's always an inherent risk of where are we sharing data to. So if we're simply turning AI features on without reading the small print, without questioning what's happening to our first party data, I think that's a real risk. I think that's
Yeah,
something that needs to be part of that policy that we talked about. But I think with well educated staff, with well written policies, with processes that consider the use of AI, and using software that you feel confident about and you've researched, I think all of those things add up to a world where we can use AI safely,
okay.
but it does need to be approached with a bit of common sense.
Okay. Coming back to understanding the whats and the wherefores about
Yeah.
things like data and things going there. Okay. So, what about talking about using AI within tools and how effectively, if you've got things like Salesforce or you've got HubSpot, those kind of tools, you're seeing those appear. The quality, I think, is generally getting better. Although
Mm.
there was an AI assistant which I did yesterday, and it was basically worse than a search function. But anyway, that beside, what about like more custom uses of AI within people's revenue generating technology? What's the approach with that?
So I think this is where it starts to get really interesting. And we've done some work recently with clients that, they're really interesting use cases that off the bat maybe weren't the most obvious uses for AI.
Yeah,
And I think this is where having that discussion around what are the pain points, what is it that we're trying to solve, trying to understand a particular process flow from end to end, whether that be part of your sales process, whether it be part of your marketing team, whether it be more
Yeah.
customer facing and part of your product, understanding where AI is a good fit for the type of task, whether it's a very repetitive task or a high volume data task, but also where it's going to add value. What we don't
Yeah.
want to be doing is saying, just stick AI on it, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Because I've heard people sort of talk about like AI is the answer. Now, what was the question again? It's
Yeah,
not that way round. It's good that you highlight that because I think if people are looking at adoption, start with where's the need in terms of, as you say, repetitive, time consuming, problematic tasks and look at the process there. And I suppose process mapping plays a really important role at this point.
it does, because you need to fully understand. We've talked before about how sometimes business leaders aren't aware of what's going on within their technology or their processes, and you sometimes have these silos between teams. So understanding that full picture with process mapping and understanding where data is flowing across your business, what processes are interconnected, where teams interact with each other, and where they interact with their technology, that will start to then highlight, well, actually, there's an awful lot of manual importing going on over here, or someone's doing thousands of research over here. And those are things when people start talking about data or research, those are things where you can start going, actually, AI is very good at that. And when built in a flow that is very structured and very set, you can harness AI in a way that it's going to give you very repeatable outcomes. So,
Okay.
good example, we worked recently with a company where they wanted to automate parts of their sales process. We spent time with them understanding where is the value going to be? Where are your real problems? Where do we want to make sure that we're focusing on letting people do their jobs in a way that only the people can? And therefore, how do we put AI in the background of this process to be
Yeah.
going off and doing things like research, bringing data back, formatting that data, structuring it in a way that can ultimately put out a very repeatable output, which in this case was a customized pitch deck to allow them to really understand that process from end to end. You need to have various different AI agents throughout a flow that can do a set job, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
And that's why we talk about infusing AI, because this is not a case of, oh, I just bring in a chatbot and it will do a thing for me. It's a case of each part of this is locked down in a way that it's going to do what it is expected to do. But that kind of the magic, if you like, of what AI can do is then go off and do that
Yeah.
very fast and have really,
Okay.
really good results. Free up
Okay.
people to go and do the proper work.
Okay. I'm going to take you back to the start of that interesting section there. You talked about process mapping. Now,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt a lot of people are going to go off and ask ChatGPT to tell them, or maybe old school Google it. But can you just explain to the people listening what does process mapping mean? Because I think people are probably concerned that it's more complicated than it really is.
Sure. Okay, so in a nutshell, process mapping is essentially bringing together all of the things that you are currently doing across your business. So it can be everything from which systems or which people do a certain function, what that function is, what it links to, and bringing that together in a visual map so that you can literally understand in this particular part of our business. So maybe it's the handoff of new sales leads. These people are responsible for these things. They use these tools. The data flows from here to here. This is the sequential process that happens mapped out visually. And the reason it's a really powerful process is because what we tend to find within businesses is that individuals know their bit of the process. And a lot of it's up here, it's in their heads, so they're not necessarily sharing it that well across the business. And generally, there isn't somebody that's holistically taking ownership of that process from end to end. They do
Yeah,
mapping it out. You can start to go, well, hang on, what happens in this part? Where does the data go after that? Or who owns that bit? Or why does nothing happen here? So it's a
yeah,
really, really good way of being able to break a process apart as well as mapping it out.
yeah. Thank you for that. And I think it has to be the starting point for any kind of customized AI implementation solving the problem is the process map defines the problem, if you like, in terms of business is a collection of processes working in harmony, hopefully. And it was interesting because yesterday there was a conversation about that prospective company that came to us and said, "Oh, we'd like you to solve this with AI," and we actually had to go back to them and say, "Well, we can't because you don't have a defined process. You've got all of these
Mm.
things going off all over the place, and you can't until you've mapped what you want it to be. You can't just throw
Yeah,
AI at the problem."
exactly. And sometimes the answer, or at least the first port of call, is change the process. Technology is great, but it can't fix everything. Ultimately, if people are not engaging with technology the way that we want them to as a business, the technology can only go so far.
Yeah. I do think also there's a thing about being open to changing process because you've got the technology.
Mm.
So, it should be something that when you're implementing technology, look at the why we're doing this.
Yeah,
If your route to getting to the objective is this way, if the technology can take you in a shorter route, faster route, then subject to, quality and all of that, you shouldn't be afraid to actually say, well, we could re-engineer the process underneath this because we want the objective.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you say there, it's asking the why. I think we've seen a few businesses recently who it feels a little bit like they're going through a bit of a tick box exercise of, I've been told to use AI, I've just got to tick that box.
Yeah,
That's not the right way to approach it. You know,
yeah,
this really is a genuinely very, very helpful tool. I don't want to go too much into the hyperbole of saying it's a game changer, but it is a big deal. And to just be ticking a box is not the right way to be thinking about this.
yeah. But the flip side of that, I would say, is we had a really enjoyable conversation last week with that potential new customer where they'd got this kind of, oh, well, we thought maybe you could help us with this. And then when we started asking them about problems, there was this whole sort of cascade then of like, oh, well, this is a problem. And we went, have you thought about it if you did this with technology? And I loved that conversation because I realized the power of having a conversation with us being knowledgeable about what the technology is capable of doing. Just open the minds of that company as to you could do that. And they just thought that was how it had to be.
Yeah.
I thought that was a brilliant conversation.
I agree. And it is that moment of asking the right questions of, well, could you get AI to do this? And obviously, our response at the time was, yeah, absolutely. And that sort of almost jaw dropping moment of, oh my God, we spent hours doing that.
Yeah,
And that's, that's what we're talking about here. It's quality of life for your employees. It's time saved. It's value driven, being able to kind of speed up sales velocity and things. All these things
yeah,
are things that we should be thinking about, but asking the right questions of how to get there.
yeah, absolutely. To kind of bring it right round, you've come back to this sort of self education bit of asking
Mm,
the right questions and gaining the understanding. And we talked about how fast things are moving at the start, but we've kind of brought ourselves back round to the start where you got to know something in order to get moving,
yeah.
and then do the next actions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. Don't just look at AI as this big daunting thing that's got to happen overnight. Start with education, start with policy, and build. I think the technology moves really fast, so staying ahead of it is always going to be a challenge. But the
Yeah,
place to start is now with what's in front of us. And,
yeah,
like you said, change management, thinking about how we bring different
yeah,
elements of AI into the business.
yeah. Well, I think that the AI opportunities audit that we do
Mm,
is just, I love those because
yeah,
they're so exciting when you have a systematic approach to uncovering opportunity that some of the gains are gigantic. If you think about some of the other things, and this is why I think AI and technology is such a strategic game player for the companies that get it right. You think about doing something really amazing on, like, I don't know, some SEO project or some PPC and picking on those things. So it's sort of traditional digital marketing lead generation thing. and you do something fantastic, and you get a 20% maybe uplift if it was absolutely knockout, because you're assuming you're already doing some good stuff over here anyway. So
Yeah,
20% would be a really big, like, wow, this is really good. But you could do something with this new AI, and when we look at these opportunity audits, and when you turn around and go, oh, we could save 98% of your time,
yeah,
98%. Imagine what that person can do with that freed up 98% of the time. Now they're only spending 2% on that task. Oh, that's like, wow, we haven't seen gains like that since back in the good old days of digital marketing when, people were still convincing companies to get a website because you'd get ahead if you had a website kind of thing. And it was a competitive differentiator to actually have a website. I imagine there's people listening to that going, what? You actually had to persuade people to have a website. Everybody's got a website. But I've been around that long that I had conversations with people about saying, if you get a website, you will stand out in your industry because so few people have a website. And they were like, but we've got brochures. Why would we want a website? Yeah, how the game has changed. But I think that's where we are with AI.
yeah,
We're going to be at a point in 5 years at most, maybe, where everybody's going to be in the game and the winners will have jumped ahead and the people that don't adopt fast will have fallen by the wayside kind of thing.
yeah. Absolutely agree. And I think now is the time to be doing it because the technology is much more established. It's in a position now where it is reliable enough that we can do really amazing things with it, but it's moving really fast. So now is the time to make sure you're ahead of the curve and you're really understanding where to.
Okay, that's great. I think we've covered off a lot. We probably should put a few bits and pieces in the show notes in terms of links to some of these things, education, development. I think that for summary, it's like that education informing leadership. So things like having an AI policy, and that policy's got to evolve as you evolve your use of it. AI task force, stroke AI council for adoption, then start looking at what AI you've already got access to and the tools that you've got, and then looking at the wider things. So yeah, I think the AI opportunities audit that, and people can do those kind of things if they're well informed enough themselves. But that kind of thing is then the next stage for the more bespoke, if you like, AI implementations.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. Well, that's really good. I've, as always, enjoyed chatting to you on this, and I could chat for ages, but we'll get in trouble with the team for creating too long an episode. So, any more gems before we sign off on this one, Chris?
No, I just think, it's there will come a time where AI is just one of the names that gets given to a collection of tools, if not part of every tool that we use. I liked your analogy about the policy of saying, oh, don't use a computer is kind of the equivalent. Well, it's similar as well of the way we're talking about the use of AI. And you wouldn't expect somebody in the team to not have a keyboard with their computer. And it's going to come to a point where AI is part of everything that we do within business. So
Yeah,
it is time to be adopting it and to be thinking about it not as this big standalone thing that we can copy and paste in and out of. It needs to be something that we interact with in the same way we would any of the tools that we use daily.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good. Good finishing comment there. I like that. Well, thanks to you, Chris, for another interesting conversation. Really great. And thanks to you all for listening. This has been another Revenue Rewired episode. So if you found this conversation useful, which I hope you did, please do follow us, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. Whatever platform you choose to listen to us on, and we're on all of the popular ones. To find out more about Innovation Visual or AI adoption, in fact, just go to innovationvisual.com. And until next time, keep rewiring the way you look at your revenue systems. So thank you very much, Chris, and thank you all for listening.